Boker Tov. Good morning to us as we make our way in this morning. It is beautiful to start another lovely morning together here on this fifth day of the month of June. Boker Tov. Good morning and welcome to our daily Sinai streams, Temple Sinai of Toronto's opportunity for us to connect, to reflect, and to remember as we join together here on this lovely morning, coming as we do to the middle of the month of Sivan, and having this moment as Shabbat is almost upon us to reflect on ourselves and then on our world as well. We begin allowing the words of our liturgy, of our prayer tradition, to help us in thinking about ourselves and the miracle that we represent, and therefore the responsibility and the opportunity that's before us every day. So let's join together in the English of Asher Yatzar to affirm that amazing reality. Blessed eternal God, creator of the universe, you have fashioned our bodies with wisdom, creating within us a finely balanced network. To stand before you in prayer is itself a fragile miracle. Eternal God, we praise you as the healer of body and spirit. And we join together in the blessing for Torah study as well. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah, v'arev na Adonai Eloheinu et divrei Toratcha b'finu, ובפי עמך בית ישראל, ונהיה אנחנו בצאצאינו, בצאצאי עמך בית ישראל, כולנו יודעי שמך, ולומדי תורתך לשמה, ברוך אתה אדוני, המלמד תורה לעמו ישראל. Blessed is God who teaches Torah to the people of Israel. And let's join together in Elu Dvarim as well. Elu Dvarim she'en lahem shiur. These are the obligations whose value cannot be measured. They nourish us in this world and help us to create the world to come. Kibud av va'em, to honor fathers and mothers. Ugmilut chasadim, to perform acts of love and kindness. V'ashkamad beit hamidrash shacharit ve'elvit, to attend the house of study morning and evening. V'achnasat orchim, to welcome the stranger. Uvikur cholim, to visit the sick. V'achnasat kala, to provide for brides and grooms. Ulvayat hamet, to keep faith with the dead. V'yun tfilah, to pray with sincerity, Ba'at shalom ben adam lachavero, to make peace when there is strife, the Talmud Torah keneged kulam, and the study of Torah is equal to them all, because it leads to them all. That's what our older version of the prayer said. We continue now with Shema Yisrael, our daily affirmation of the oneness of God, the oneness that in potential is present in our world and in ourselves. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Leolam Va'ed, Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha, B'chol Levavecha, U'B'chol Nafshecha, U'B'chol Meodecha, V'hayu Hadvarim Ha'ele, Asher Anochi Metzavcha Hayom Al Levavecha, V'shinantam Levanecha, V'divarta Bam, V'shivtecha B'vetecha, U'V'lechtecha V'derech, U'V'shochbecha U'Kumecha, וכשבתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובישעריך. ויאמר אדוני אל משה לאמור, דבר אל בני ישראל ואמרת עליהם, ועשו להם ציצית על כנפי בגדיהם לדורותם, ונתנו על ציצית הכנף בדיר תכלת, והיה לכם לציצית וראיתם אותו, וזכרתם את כל מצוות אדוני, ועשיתם אותם. ולא תטורו אחרי לבבכם ואחרי עיניכם, אשר אתם זונים אחריהם, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אדוני אלוהיכם אמת. And again, acknowledging the reality in our world that I want to speak to in just a few moments. We can never pray for shalom, for wholeness and peace too many times. Let's join in the translation of Sim Shalom. Give us peace, goodness, and kindness, love, and loyalty. May these blessings come upon all Israel and every nation. Eternal God, source of loving guidance, bless us with your presence. Only in the light of your presence do we receive a living Torah, directing us toward loving loyalty, righteousness, blessing, and mercy, life and peace. At each moment and for all time, may it be good in your sight to bless Israel and every nation with true shalom. Eternal God, we praise you as the source of peace. Baruch atah Adonai, oseh hashalom. Blessed is the eternal our God, who is the source of peace. So much of this time in our world has not been characterized by peace. The threat we feel from physical viruses, and the threat that we've been experiencing as well by that insidious, emotional, spiritual virus that is racism and hatred. Racism has certainly been the key element of my thoughts this week, of our news this week in our world. And so I want to speak about that, both about the reality and the challenge of judging others by their appearance, by their skin color, by other elements of their identity. And at the same time, I want to say out loud that the statement I want to share is about the values and meaning of our tradition, about the challenges of being a Jew, being a human in all times, and in this time in particular. I don't want to get caught up in politics of a particular country. Certainly in the United States, there are unique politics and systemic issues around racism. And while I'm from that country, I've lived longer here in Canada and find myself identifying here as well. But frankly, like the novel virus, the infectious failing that is racism knows no borders, and no boundaries. And so is something that affects and infects our society and potentially us, regardless of political systems. And I was listening this morning to a number of voices on CBC talking about the reality of being of African descent and living in Canada. And certainly, while acknowledged in this report, these are just a number of voices. Any voices that experience racism and hatred based on their skin, based on their identity, is too many and represents an evil that must be rooted out. But how do we do that? How do we understand this issue of prejudice, of hatred, of racism? And what image might we use to remind us and to challenge us to overcome? Well, as I've been thinking this week, I couldn't help but think back a number of Torah portions to early in the book of Leviticus, where in the book of Leviticus, we find this very odd series of passages that talks about affections on the skin. The Mitzorah, the leper, it's translated. Now, this disease is not leprosy, but it's not by coincidence that when we talk about being treated like a leper, being outcast like a leper, that idea and the relevance of that comes not only from the experience of those affected with that particular disease, but the passage in our Tanakh, in our Bible, that talks about how one is to deal with someone who has this affliction. It's a very complex passage, but there's one particular part of it that we find not in the Torah, but in rabbinic literature that I feel the need to share this morning. And that is that the Torah says that when someone is to identify as having this strange spiritual and physical disease of tzara'at, as it's known in the Torah, that there has to be a bright white affection on the skin. So the rabbis, the sages of the Mishnah, ask a question in trying to understand these details. How do we understand what it means to have a bright white problem on one's skin? And it becomes part of a conversation in the Mishnah Negaim, chapter 2, about the context, the skin color, and how skin color could affect one's judgment in this case. Now, this affectation is one that is a Jewish issue, according to our tradition, according to the Torah. And so all individuals being mentioned in this particular paragraph would be assumed by the sages to be talking about members of the people of Israel, of the Jewish people. And here's what they say in regard to understanding the effect on the skin. It says the bright spot in a German, meaning a Northern European Jew, it says Germani in this particular version of the Mishnah. There are other versions with other words there as well. The bright spot in a German appears as dull white, and the dull white spot in an Ethiopian, Kushi, an African, appears as bright white. So we need to stop there for a moment and remember that issues of race and color and issues of Jewish identity represent overlapping subsets. Jews are not a particular color. There is no racial background. And clearly here, this text, which is a minimum of 1,850 years old, is a reminder that for roughly 2 millennia at least, there's been a clear and obvious message that there is no one skin color. There is no one appearance that represents the Jewish people, that we are in fact clearly not a race. Allow me to continue on the last word of the third line of the English. Rabbi Yishmael says, the children of Israel, may I be atonement for them, are like boxwood, he means in color, neither black nor white, but of an intermediate shade. Rabbi Akiva says, painters have materials with which they portray figures in black and white and in intermediate shades. Let therefore a paint of an intermediate shade be brought and applied around the outside of the affection of the nega, and it will then appear as on skin of an intermediate shade. Rabbi Judah says, in determining the colors of the negaim, the law is to be lenient and not stringent. What does that mean? He continues, let therefore the affections, the negaim, the tzarad of the German be inspected on the color of his own body so that the law is lenient, and let that of the Ethiopian be inspected as if it were on the intermediate shades, if the law is also lenient. Now the sages are generally understood to be given the proper ruling. The sages say both are to be treated as if the nega were on the intermediate shade. I find the image that's used here of the arts and painting to be extremely powerful, to be a recognition that our culture and our experience certainly is essential to our identity, but as an outsider, we cannot in any way judge people, judge one another by the color of their skin, even though we've learned in thousands and thousands of years of human history that this is a natural mistake to make. That when we're addressing people, not just in regard to this particular biblical affectation, but we must imagine that we're able to paint everyone as us. As part of we. I don't mean that we should be the same or that we should deny individuals' experience, but instead that we should not say, I can see you're different, but instead should say, wow, I can feel how we are the same, how we are one, and that our differing perspectives and experiences can enrich us as long as we remember that the outside affectations, the outside factors cannot drive our decision-making, our judgment, or our behavior. In fact, what Rabbi Yishmael says, words that are usually passed over in this Rabbi Yishmael on the fourth line there, he says, the children of Israel, may I be atonement for them, ani kabbalatan. What does that mean? May I be the atonement for them? And Rabbi Ovadia of Bartanura, one of the most famous commentaries of the Mishnah, says, what do those words mean? They mean that he says that out of his love and his chibah, his fondness for the people of Israel. When he says, may I be their atonement, he says, I love them. I would take their challenges upon myself. And so I think those few words also remind us that part of our ability to overcome the national inclination to judge from the outside, to allow racism, prejudice, anti-Semitism, anti-Muslim to creep in. The antidote is to remind us that we need to love our neighbor, to love the stranger, to love our fellow human being like ourselves. That when we start from love, when we start from the common humanity that binds us together, that is the strongest message that we can have or share. A simple message of love is not going to fix systemic racism or undo people's real experience of being identified, of being marked because of their outward appearance. But it does give us a place to start that is a very Jewish place. If we do not know the heart of the stranger, if we do not know the heart of the oppressed, if we do not seek to connect to the experience of others and their feelings of being treated with prejudice, then we cannot begin to be a force for goodness and justice and peace in a world that so desperately needs them. There is potentially so much more to say, and yet it is action that speaks louder than words. And so we will continue this morning with combining words and making them into prayer, meaning they should drive us to action, to be present and supportive of all those who at this time are ill, who are unwell, who are isolated, or who are on the front lines with one for us. So in that spirit, thinking of members of our community who are themselves struggling with illness and isolation, we turn now to words of refuah. משברך אבותינו אברהם יצחק ויעקב ואמותינו שרה רבקה לאה ורחל וירפא את כל מכותינו יהי רצון מלפניך אדוני אלוהינו להחלימם ולרפאותם לשלח לנו מהרה רפואה שלמה ועטרת שלום ונאמר amen. May the one who blessed our ancestors bless and heal all who suffer. May it be the divine will to provide healing and strength, reveal to us the holiness of life, the wholeness of shalom. And together we say, amen. We now continue as we remember, recalling those who've died in recent days and weeks, those who died at this season and years past, and those whom we have taken into our hearts with our own. During the period of the past 30 days, we extend our condolences to the families of Andrew Kosman, Paula Rich, Susie Matei Veda, Esther Siskin, Cheryl Okorovsky, Irving Coven, Julius Bell, Diane Novak, Bill Schmelzer, Ralph Rothstein, Anita Fleischer, Lillian Gain. And we remember all victims of violence and terror, including Amit Ben Yigal and George Floyd. On your site, on the anniversaries of their deaths on this 13th day of the month of Sivan, we remember Ben Barden, Dulcie Cooper, Ralph Dankner, Rachel Kernerman, Abraham Joshua Landau, Joseph Lerner, Sheer Moncars, Edward Montague, Glenn Montague, Winnie Montague, Florence Weinstein. Zichronam Livracha, may their memories be a blessing to us. Our griefs and sympathies are mingled, as together we turn to words sanctified by memory, words glorified by hope in the Kaddish Yatom. Yit Gadal v'yit Kadash Shemei Rabbah, be'alma divarach Yerutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon v'yomechon v'chaye dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agala u'bizman kariv v'imru amen. Yehe Shmei Rabbah mevarach le'alam u'lalmei almaya. Yit barach v'yishtabach v'yit pa'ar v'yitromam v'yit naseh. V'yit hadar v'yit aleh v'yit halal Shemei de Kudisha b'reichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, ta'amiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehe shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. May the source of peace send peace to all who mourn, bring comfort to all who are bereaved, and together we say, amen. I hope it's a great day for you. I want to especially wish a great day today to Marlene and Bob Sachter of our congregation, today being their 65th wedding anniversary. Bob and Marlene, Mazel Tov, have an amazing day. Wishing everyone a fantastic day and a Shabbat Shalom, Boker Tov.